Hi, Ms. Lancaster here. Just a quick video to kind of introduce you to the information from Chapter 4. Okay, so this is regarding gender and the inequalities in relationship to gender. So when we think about this, there's sex, there's gender, and there's sexuality. This chapter is really focusing on how sex and gender create inequalities in society. So one of the main things that I want you to take away from this chapter is, as the book talks about, that gender is a social problem. I personally would not say that gender is a social problem, but the inequalities that come about as a result of how it's embedded in our daily lives can become a problem. Okay, so when we think about this gender problem, it is gender inequality and the meanings that we've assigned to our sex that create our gender, how that inequality exists. So first off, I kind of want to share, and I've shared this in your class, but I would like to share this image and kind of go over it just real quick. This is the genderbread person, and it is really kind of getting us, I like to share this to kind of get you thinking about the difference between sex, gender, and the complexities of of gender. So sex is, of course, the biological aspect, as discussed right here, like showing right here biological sex, female, male, or intersex. Remembering that there is not, excuse me, there's not just a binary as what is reinforced in our society that you're this or that, male or female. There are individuals in society who are intersex, and intersex is actually probably more common than my son's rare disease. So just kind of recognizing to have this binary that you're this or that is potentially problematic. And then gender, it's kind of divided here. Gender is the social construction, right? Both sex and gender are socially constructed ideas. Sex is based on the ascribed physical characteristics, whether it be the primary or secondary sex characteristics. But gender are the socially constructed ideas related to the actions, the activities, the way that we express ourselves, the expectations that are placed on an individual based on their sex. Okay, so while sex is defined at birth, gender can be much more fluid and changing when we really consider how gendered expectations today might be quite different than gendered expectations 50 years ago, 60 years ago, 100 years ago. So I like to share this genderbread person, make sure that you kind of look at it and see how the identity is really how you feel, how, who you think you are as yourself. You can identify as a woman or as a man or anywhere in between, right? And the expression is how we express ourselves. When we think about this gender expression, as far as feminine, would be the traditional gender roles attached to female. Masculine would be the traditional gender roles attached to male. Androgynous is somewhere in between. So expression could be the way that we address the actions that we take, the various things like that. But one of the key things is, now this chapter doesn't really talk about sexual orientation all that much, but it is kind of bringing this down too, that this is a separate line. They don't intersect, right? So our sexual orientation is who we're attracted to. So your sex does not determine your gender, does not determine your identity. It does not determine your sexual orientation. So I just kind of like to start off with that, kind of getting you looking at that. If you've never seen this genderbread person before, I just feel like it's kind of great information to kind of look at. So after stopping sharing that, I really kind of just want us to think about what gender inequality is. It has nothing really to do with the sex, but it has to do with those gendered ideas that are attached, right? Attached to the sex ideas. So in this chapter, you'll notice it really gets into patterns and trends in relationship to gender in college and work and Title IX, gender segregated spaces in general, the gender gap in STEM, right? That it has been kind of historically seen as more for men. Gender in work and how the interchanges, how the expectations in the home may shape the expectations in the work environment. So inequalities that are both individual as well as institutional. Thinking about when you're thinking about the pay gap, a lot of times people think about this, the pay gap, that is gender pay gap, as being more of just a discrimination, um, based on, men and women not making the same pay, but there's so much more involved. Hopefully you'll watch that video that I gave as a part of the assignment. Really kind of gets into some of the other aspects and the social ideas that are attached to gender that kind of play a part in shaping the wage gap. The theories that are discussed this chapter are pretty important to kind of understand. Again, we come right back to functionalism, conflict theory, and symbolic interactionism, each of them having their own way of explaining gender inequality. Starting off with functionalism, it doesn't really see gender inequality as an inequality. They see different functions that have been attached to different different categories of people in society, with their sex role theory, recognizing that there's both instrumental roles and expressive roles that have been technically assigned, instrumental being assigned to the masculine gender roles and expressive roles as being attached to the feminine gender roles. Just kind of recognizing how that has kind of played part in the ideas of society. Conflict theory, breaking down the conflict theory, it really does talk about the inequalities that exist based on gender, and that it is a result in many ways of patriarchy, and that there is this recognition that those that are in power in society are typically men, and that the rules are kind of set up in a way to benefit them. We have to kind of recognize that, while that may not be intentional, it still happens, right? We have to think about privilege that was introduced last chapter, was talked about last chapter. Privilege exists. In your textbook, it really kind of gets into the different levels of feminism that is under that conflict perspective. So just kind of go through those, look at those, recognize those different things. Let me know if you have questions. Symbolic interactionism, thinking about that key idea about how all of our interactions shape our symbols and shape our meaning. So if we really think about it, sex and gender are packed full of symbols, right? Gender roles, gender expectations, those are all symbolic and are taught and reinforced through interaction. So part of the idea of like doing gender is that we actively interact in fulfilling our gender roles. So that's kind of part of that expression piece, that we are accountable to those around us, right? And we receive positive and negative feedback when we're not interacting in the way that is expected of us. The specialized theory, this chapter, queer theory, kind of think about what queer theory is. It very much relates to symbolic interactionism, in a way that is basically saying we have all these labels, right? We have all of these meanings attached to these symbols that we are assigning. And when we construct these ideas based on these labels and based on our interactions, we are actually in many ways creating inequality through those labels. So queer theory is really kind of questioning the narrative that is taught and reinforced in us, that really that they basically say that there is no universal explanation for things. And if we really think about gender, I'm like, the idea that gender and the gendered ideas, the expectations that would be placed on me 20 years ago are not the same as the expectations that would be placed on my daughter today. So just kind of recognizing how gender roles have shifted and altered and changed over time. Sexuality has shifted and altered and changed over time. The expectations that are related to that, sex has changed and altered over time. So this grand narrative of this, especially when we think about the sex role theory that functionalism talks about, that basically is assigning all of the instrumental responsibilities on men, while women have all of the expressive responsibilities. That's just the narrative that's been created according to queer theory. So as you're reading through these, try to let me know if you have any questions for your assignment this chapter. You want to make sure that you watch that video, do the ed puzzle that I've assigned to you, and then start your discussion in the discussion board. All right, have a great day.